So again, thank you very much, and let's get jumping right into to the webinar. So I want to introduce myself, Sean Fitzpatrick, one of the founders of TalentMap. So I've been involved in this business for, I guess, 15, 16 years now. And my work is really around helping our clients understand what engagement is and understanding the survey program and how it could be used to really help them measure and manage engagement. But what I want to do is introduce Norm Bailey-David. Norm leads our consulting business here at TalentMap. Norm's been with us for well over a year, and he comes to us with quite a bit of experience in the consulting field, having worked for some of the large consulting firms internationally, as well as for some specific research and social science researcher organizations over the last 10+ years. So he comes really steeped in the whole area of organizational development and organizational behavior, as well as an understanding on how surveys can be used as a catalyst to drive change. And Norm's got well over 25 years in a range of different industries from public and private sector. So we're pleased to have Norm be presenting, and I'll turn it over to Norm in just a minute. Just one or two slides on TalentMap just to give you a bit of a sense on who we are. Some of the participants on the phone know who we are, some are new. So just to give you a sense of our organization, and I think that's important just so you understand the context of where we're coming at from our presentation of this material. But we've been in business for 15 years now as a company. We focus exclusively on employee engagement surveys. We've run thousands of surveys, millions of employees, and probably run 400 or 500 programs each year. So it's really given us a real good sense of not only how to run programs and surveys and measurement effectively, scientifically, but also gives us a great sense of what we're seeing as some general trends across the country as well as around the world on employee engagement, and what some organizations are doing around best practices to improve their engagement of their employees. So it's an area that's been really important to executives over the last number of years, and I anticipate engagement is going to continue to be really important over the next number of years as we try to really do more with less in today's workplace. And then the next slide should give you a bit of a sense on the types of organizations we work with. We do quite a bit of work with a range of different companies, anything from technology, not-for-profits and associations, healthcare, financial services, and a whole range of retail and other types of crown corporations, universities, and so on. So we do work with quite a range of different organizations. And up on the top left, we also have been an organization that's collected and reported on Canada's top 100 employers for about 4 or 5 years. So that gives us great insight into not only what's happening with the organizations we work with, but also what some of the top employers that get recognized each year, how they're doing and how they measure engagement, and what are the practices that are working for these organizations to be successful in the marketplace for finding, keeping, and attracting great people. So without further ado, what I would like to do is turn it over to Norm, and I'll have Norm give you, I think, hopefully a very good session on professional growth and why we're choosing professional growth as a topic to touch on this month, and what organizations can do to help drive that. Norm?
Thank you very, very much, Sean. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody, wherever in the country or the continent you may be. This is the second time we're actually doing this webinar, and it was so popular the first time around that many of our clients, many people who couldn't make it, who had previously registered, asked for us to redo this webinar. And the reason, I think, is pretty obvious. Obviously, you have an interest. If you wouldn't have had an interest in this particular topic, you wouldn't be signed on and listening to me right now. But where this is coming from, essentially, is having done so much work in engagement and seeing a very, very particular trend emerge over the last, I would say, year to 18 months, at least in the over a year that I've been here with TalentMap, and that is challenges with regards to keeping employees engaged all around professional growth. And there's a specific challenge in that career aspirations and expectations regarding career have really changed, and they've changed as a result of a couple of phenomena, but most importantly, they've changed, or they're changing as a result of the entry of millennials into the workplace. And this demographic phenomenon is having a huge impact, because the expectations that my generation, the boomers, had when we started our career are very, very different than what the new crop of employees coming in their 20-somethings and even 30-somethings are expecting with regards to what a professional growth and what a career should look like. And that's putting a lot of strain, especially on organizations that are small or organizations that have little or no growth or very slow growth. And frankly, what's happening is there's more people who want promotions and want growth than there are positions available. And as a result, people get dejected and they start to disengage. So what we've been seeing in the research, and what I'm going to talk to you about today, is how some of the best practice organizations are dealing with it, as well as some of the latest research coming out of some of the big academic institutions such as Harvard on this particular issue. But first I want to sort of set the scene, and I think a couple of slides just to reinforce some things that you might already know or feel. And the first thing is, when we do one of our many engagement surveys, we very typically see that professional growth is one of the most important drivers of engagement. And that basically means that an employee's level of engagement in the organization is directly related to how they feel about learning and professional growth in that organization. And as you can see here, this is just taken from our benchmark data in terms of some of the predictive modeling we do, but it's very, very clear that professional growth, as you can see, is the second most important. And in many organizations that we survey, it is the single most important factor. So if employees aren't happy with their career aspirations or their growth prospects, chances are very high that they're going to be less than engaged. And of course, we know the costs, or we can assume that the costs of engagement are very, very high. This slide shows a typical example, and I can basically take a slide from almost any one of our client presentations, and it'll look very, very similar to this one. Obviously, we've taken the name off this one, but it's very interchangeable with many. We ask a number of questions around professional growth, and then you can see very, very clearly, very visually, that the issue of career aspirations being achieved at the organization is becoming increasingly problematic. In this example, we see that less than half of employees at this particular organization, which was quite a large and growing organization, not just a small one, is having a detrimental impact. And when we combine that with the previous slide, where we see professional growth being so important in terms of engagement, it stands to reason then that this particular issue is having a high level of importance in terms of how we can engage our employees. The other thing, obviously, as you know, in more and more research, I could pull anything from Google, and if you did the Google search yourself, you could find a reams of information that would support the assertion that the number one or number two reason that people are leaving jobs right now, so the causes of attrition, is advancement, is career. It's the lack of career growth. Now, what's changed from generation to generation isn't the amount of growth in the economy, although it has sort of flattened out a little bit. We don't have the same growth that we had in the 50s and 1960s, but there's been 3 decades in between where we've had similar growth patterns. What's changed is the expectations around that, and I'm going to discuss that in a little bit more detail in terms of how we handle that. So the fundamental challenge, therefore, is really how do we provide ample professional growth opportunities in a small or a flat or a low growth organization. And that's, you know what, our experience shows that that's most organizations. I mean, we do survey a number of very high growth startups or tech firms or financial institutions, or small financial institutions, that is, where that's less of an issue. But that's a very small minority. Most organizations are dealing with this in a very, very serious way. So that's really the challenge, and that's what I want to address in the remainder of our discussion this afternoon or this morning. So how do we address, how do we provide these ample growth opportunities? Well, not this way, not the traditional career ladder. So in our lifetime, I guess some of us who've been around the block a few more times than others, we've come to, and those are making the decisions in many organizations now are of the boomer generation, maybe some Gen Xers as well, and we've basically come into the workforce, and the career development, career advancement in the workforce is based on the lifetime loyalty paradigm, where we would go into an organization and we would expect that it would create, even at our discretion, whether we wanted it or not as employees, the opportunity for lifetime employment and lifetime career growth would be there. In actual fact, as we all know by now, that's long gone. This is not a new phenomenon. What's new in this is essentially the expectations that I've been talking about, and more importantly, the demand for career growth is far exceeding the supply of available positions. Just think of your organizational, your organization, whether it's a flat organization or one that's more like a pyramid. We just don't have enough boxes in the organizational chart to satisfy all of the career aspirations for the people that we'd like to keep, right? The other thing about the lifetime loyalty paradigm is it really avoids risk, and it doesn't reward entrepreneurial behavior. And any of us that have spent any amount of serious time in a large organization and have seen the attrition and the turnover take place, what tends to happen is the people that are loyal and last a very, very long time essentially get, for lack of a better phrase, pulled to the top as other people leave. They're not necessarily the best, the most entrepreneurial. As a matter of fact, these are the individuals that tend to avoid risk the most. So it's not encouraging the type of entrepreneurial behavior that many organizations are trying to encourage today. So not only is the lifetime paradigm gone, it wasn't really, it's not really suited to our needs or to our economy. So essentially, the traditional career path, somewhat facetiously, it was fun while it lasted, I guess, but it's gone. So what are we doing to replace it? In actual fact, many of us are living in the past in that paradigm, and what I want to try to do today is put some suggestions forward to break through that, to think of new ways to encourage professional growth. So the other thing is, I mean, the dead contract, the lifelong career contract, I'm beating a little bit of a dead horse here, but we need a new career paradigm. We need a new way to think about how we attract and then grow talent over the long term. Essentially, one of the things that's happened with the lifetime career paradigm is it's dead, and it's with the new generation. They've looked at us boomers, and I can tell you an anecdote, a very quick anecdote about conversations with my oldest son, and basically he thinks I'm an idiot for the loyalty that I've shown to organizations that have laid off employees. When they want new skills, they hire from the outside. When the training costs are too high, they hire from the outside. So the loyalty has always been one way. One of the things that I love about seeing the attitudes of the millennial generation is they're very realistic about that. But because of that, that sense of loyalty or lifetime loyalty is gone. So what do we have? Well, we have a winner-take-all economy that strikes people in the decision-making positions now as fair, because it provides a way to keep costs under control. But what it has also done is created a widespread disillusionment among the rest of the workforce, and that's caused that lack of loyalty. So no longer does the new generation or even members of my generation go into an organization thinking that they're going to have a lifetime step-ladder career approach. They're much more thinking in terms of being free agents. I'll be working for you as long as you're good for me is much more the attitude, as opposed to I'm going to invest my time, and with hard work maybe I'll get to the next step. A very, very different change of attitude. So I think this part of the discussion is stuff that you probably, if you didn't know for sure, you were already intuitively aware of and have heard anecdotally around it. Those are things that are not new. What I want to start talking about now is some of the research and some of our experience in terms of what some of the new ways to enhance professional growth are. And essentially, if we're talking about changing the attitudes towards that lifelong career paradigm, that stepladder approach to career development, we have to start by acknowledging and understanding that it's an anachronism, it's dead. So if we start with that assumption, which isn't easy with the policy framework that many organizations have in place, it's not easy to do, but we have to start with this new way of thinking. And some of the new thinking coming out of a number of institutions, I'm going to relate mostly to a couple of articles coming out of Harvard Business Review, and I'll provide a reference to that at the end of the session. But really, what are some of the things that we're seeing work very well? I'm going to talk about. There's 4 different ways. One is we call career management, and I'll talk about what that means in a second. But really, if you look at and contrast that stepladder approach, that going from entry level to intermediate level to senior level to manager, that's gone. That's not the way that people think about careers anymore. It's very much like that twisted snake you see up here in the top left-hand corner. So if our role is will no longer be in terms of engaging our employees, will no longer be in terms of guaranteeing lifetime employment and career growth, an expectation that we can never live up to anyway. It will be how do we manage the career as opposed to the performance. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. The next way is all around networking. Networking in a sales or professional services profession it's pretty obvious. What's not obvious is many other roles in an organization can be encouraged also to network with the outside, and I'll tell you why that's so important. I'll talk about a concept called tours of duty, and then we'll talk about the importance of developing and maintaining and nurturing alumni networks. And with those 4 things, really, if we take 1 or 2 or even look at 3 or 4 of them, we can see a transition happening between how we managed careers in the past and how we can engage our folks and manage their career in the future. So let's talk about career management first of all. Well, historically, what we've done as organizations is we've looked at, let's take an entry-level employee. Well, the first year goes by and we do a performance management review. We look at the past, we see how they've performed, and based on their employee's current position and skills, we give strengths, we give weaknesses. It's all about us, the employer. And there's one position available at the intermediate level, maybe 4 or 5 entry-level people, and we basically pick the one who's had the best past performance, slot them in, and leave the other 4 disgruntled, even though any one of the 3 or 4 people could have filled that role, and obviously you can see the detrimental impact that has on the 4 that don't get the position. Well, how do we deal with that? Well, career management is a concept that looks at the employee in terms of lifetime employability as opposed to a stepladder approach and a promise we cannot fulfill of promotion. So when we're looking at managing one's career, we take the approach that, okay, entry-level person, we will provide you skills. We will help you realize your career goals. Career being career writ large, whether or not it's with our organization. We will invest in training. We do that anyway for most of our employees, but we provide them lifetime employable skills. We invest in the employee in that way. Now, I'm not talking about dollars and cents investment. I'm talking about an approach that shouldn't necessarily cost us any more than what we're already doing, but the approach or the perspective is different. Fundamentally, what we're doing here is we're empowering the employee to find solutions and answers to own their own career, but it's not necessarily going to be with us. We only have so many positions that we can fill as we move up the ladder. But the difference, the fundamental difference here is we're not pretending that everybody's eligible or we're going to provide everybody with that promotion, which is the false promise that we engage in now. It's really in addressing all of the employees that are performing well, all the employees that have potential, and investing in their own career lifetime employability. When the employee sees that, experience shows that then they see that it's beneficial for them to provide, basically to perform. And then because they see that the organization is investing in providing those skills, that training, that experience, and that lifetime employability, that then they can then market themselves whether or not it's within our organization or outside the organization, they tend to be much more engaged. And that's the name of this game. It really is engaging the employees where we don't have the professional growth prospects. So that's career management. The second one we're talking about is network development. Now, network development is usually, up till now, it's been the purview of sales, business development, professional services, people who know that the network essentially it tends to be an asset. Well, what we're finding, what social media is showing us, is that the knowledge that any individual employee, whether or not they work on a production line, whether or not they work, not outside in a very, very internal role, whether it's in a healthcare role, what have you, is the strength of an individual's power and contribution rises with the strength of their own network. And you can imagine if I, being the individual, basically I can multiply my contribution, multiply my level of knowledge by the knowledge that comes from interacting with an external network. Now, in a generation or two ago, networking basically meant cocktail parties and dinners. Well, now it's basically just an extension of one's desktop to network online. But what hasn't necessarily followed is the encouragement of the organization to do that. And as a matter of fact, it's been discouraged. We put up roadblocks. We think if somebody is on LinkedIn or on Facebook during company time or organization time that they're slacking off, when in actual fact they're learning, they're exchanging with people in similar positions, and they're contributing, and that knowledge contributes to our network. And of course, by encouraging that network development, we're encouraging their employability, which I talked about before, but we're also helping them learn and grow. And so if we can, if the individual's power rises with the strength of the network, i.e. I to the power of we, then it goes to show, it stands to reason that if I to the power of we, then the power of the company is basically a function of the power of the individual. So we can see the benefits of the organization to encouraging that network development. And then it pays off not only in the knowledge and the contacts that individuals bring, it also will pay off directly in terms of revenue. In my former employ with I used to work for a global survey research company. And what we were starting to do at that time, not too long ago, just last year, was essentially equip our employees. Anybody who wanted to, we would give them a little bit of a seminar, an hour seminar, in terms of how to use LinkedIn. And these were not necessarily the business development people. These were the graphic artists. These were the research analysts. These were people who don't normally network during the day or an evening on behalf of the organization. But what we found is they tied into groups of like-minded individuals who share their interests, whether it would be in graphic design, infographics, statistics, and research, and they brought this new knowledge into the organization. And more importantly, they were engaged, and their engagement rose because they did that, because they felt the organization was behind them. So they would start to promote the organization in a positive way and represent the organization. It had nothing to do with sales, but revenue and reputation started to increase as a result. So that's the payoff is not only in terms of for the corporation, we can't forget that the key payoff here is the individual's own learning and growth, and i.e. professional development, which is what we're talking about here today. Tours of duty. Tours of duty is something that's interesting, and it's something that's extremely controversial right now. And I love to start the discussion because it really is a true recognition that our lifetime career paradigm no longer applies. A tour of duty, it can take a number of forms, but conceptually what it is, and I'll tell you, I'll get into the 2 to 5 year renewable contract, which starts to get into more specifics. But fundamentally what we're doing is we're recognizing that the lifetime career model no longer applies, not only from our ability to provide unlimited promotion opportunity, but also the demographic or the new approach to business, which says most employees don't necessarily want to work for us full-time, long-term, for a lifetime anyway. That's not in their expectation set. So if that's the case, then why not, and this is really the manifestation of the career management model that I was talking about before, is why not look at, instead of an open-ended lifetime contract, whereas we will promise you the chance of a promotion that might never happen over time, year after year, and inevitably some people will be disappointed. Why don't we say, well, over the 2 to 5 years of a renewable contract, you come in as an employee, you perform, you strive to produce the tangible achievements, you do what you would normally do, and then we invest. We take that significant step towards lifetime employee. Now, when there's an end date to that contract, there's a number of things that take place. We can see a horizon where the employability becomes much more important as opposed to the employment. So then, if that's encouraged and supported by the organization, which we have to remember, it's not just a 5-year term contract where at the end of 5 years, away the person goes. No, what the organization is committing to is to improving their skills, experience, and employability during that 2 to 5 years. So that is really the carrot for the employee, is really looking at that from a long-term perspective beyond the 5 years. Where it's controversial is I get a lot of pushback saying, well, most employees, most recruits, essentially, they don't like the fact that there's an end game and they're concerned about job security. Well, we can always renew the tour, and I think that's the misconception. The tour does not have to end. It can always be renewed if both parties agree. And what can happen with the new tour of duty is it could be for a new position. It could be for an adopted position. It could be for a changed position. But that renewal, that perspective of renewal is also a recipe for further motivation and engagement. But it's also two-way. So the employee holds out essentially too. So it's a much more entrepreneurial mechanism. There is an element of risk involved, for sure, but that risk is counterbalanced by the guarantee of lifetime employability. So the employee is then motivated much more with the promise of lifetime employability and the skills and experience that they'll accrue as a result of that 2 to 5 year contract than the promise, the potential promise of a promotion that they may never get, and a loyalty that they may never have. We already know that. So the argument that, well, what's going to happen when they leave, they're not loyal. Well, right now they're not loyal anyway. That's the reality, as I showed you before. So that's basically, then the tour of duty can take a number of different forms. This is just conceptually what we're doing, what's happening. The research at Harvard that we've been looking into is showing that in certain sectors, this is it's obviously taking off in some places more than others. I got a question the last time around, is this universally applicable or does it apply better in among different types of people? And what we're seeing is that yes, absolutely. This concept, which is in its infancy still, it's still very conceptual. It's not being applied very widely as yet, although that will start to change. Where it's having the most traction is in two areas. It's in essentially re-engaging the prospective retiree. So as the boomers approach retirement age, then they're much more amenable to something that's more finite, and something that's is a lot more open-ended. So that obviously, and because it's retirement is at the end of the horizon, there's no risk there. But what's astounding, what's surprising is we're seeing in a number of sectors, in some of the very high growth sectors, like tech, for example, this is becoming the norm, and it's actually the millennial generation, which is who it's designed for in the first place, that are really accepting this and embracing this concept, because what they're looking for is they're looking for rapid growth. We've all heard the anecdote about the millennials who want to occupy the corner office in 18 months. And this is the mechanism that gets them there faster in their eyes, as opposed to working for a large organization where there's several rungs in the ladder, or many rungs in the ladder in some cases, on the way to the top. They want to move much faster than that. And this is a way that they can do that, and everybody wins. So tours of duty, it's something, take a look at it, do a little bit more research. Give me a shout. You'll have my coordinates at the end of the webinar to discuss, but we're seeing good things with it. Well, I've talked about career management. I've talked about network development. I've talked about the tour of duty. The common thread, the common theme in here is we're no longer talking about lifetime open-ended employment, which is, as some of the more skeptical folks among us will say, well, aren't people going to be leaving? I mean, do we really want to encourage people? We're going to train them and then they leave? Well, you know what, folks? That's what's already happening. So that's not changing. But okay, so if after all that we still have people that are walking at the door, what should our approach be? Well, of course, the first one is if it's someone that's highly valued in the organization, a top performer, we want to try to change their mind. Or we want to re-engage them in a different tour or a different contract. In some cases, they might see a growth opportunity elsewhere. So what do we do next? Well, we congratulate them, and then we welcome to our organization's alumni network. So what we need to have in place, and this is something that also is not new, but has been very, very limited to a number of sectors. Professional services, for example, the consulting industry has been doing this for quite some time. Although they're changing now how they manage the alumni networks. But in many organizations, once someone left the organization, if there was any alumni network or alumnus network that existed, it was informal by the alumni. So what we're saying is what we want to do is institutionalize or formalize a network where the employee, once they do step out the door and move on to other prospects, that we still have an affiliation with them. It's a lifelong affiliation. And why do we need to do that? Well, there's a number of benefits, and basically everybody in this system benefits. Obviously, there's benefits for the people who leave, and which might not be necessarily obvious. Once they leave, assuming that they leave on positive terms, as most people do, then we already know that many former employees of any organization keep in touch. What we want to do is provide a platform or a framework to do that, and then to provide benefits. So there's networking. Obviously, there's networking that goes on. We know that. Another benefit for the alumnus is they maintain the contacts and friendships that they've established over the years that they spend, and that's really the carrot for them. They want to keep in touch. Obviously, they want good references going forward. And that ongoing affiliation, then, that strengthens their personal brand. So anybody in casual conversation, anybody who's worked with a well-known brand or well-known company is very, very quick to mention that part of their history. For example, I spent many years with the organization PricewaterhouseCoopers. It stands me in good stead to make sure that I mention that on occasion because it provides added credibility. So there's definitely benefits for the alumni, but that's not where it stops. There's benefits for the employees who stay. And in a high turnover organization or an organization, or as many of our organizations will be, where we have increasing number of people retiring, we're going to basically establish a mechanism where we can keep the corporate memory. So it's a lot easier when we have a network of alumni that we can tap into if there's a question about a file or a project that happened a year or 2 years ago, and we need some expertise that's no longer there, but they're in the alumni network. And you know what, folks? Experience shows that the members of the alumni are more than happy to pitch in. They're more than happy to help out and lend their expertise, whether it's on a very, very quick, informal telephone call or email basis, or a short stint, a short contract, more formally. So, and then the current employees obviously network, and then they gain knowledge and experience from the employees who've left or the alumni as they move around. So you have a situation where not only you have your current employee base, but when we're talking about networking, linking their network development to folks who understand the organization very well and who've left, moved on, and are providing knowledge from their new ventures. An extremely valuable source of information, and also very, very stimulating for the employees themselves who remain. The organization benefits in the way that I've already talked about. And in addition, many alumni networks are tapped into for recruiting former employees. Some people go back, and it's a great source. And then there's also revenue through client placement. So this is why professional services was the first to get on this bandwagon several years ago, was people who were working for, let's say, a consulting firm, then moved on to a client or a buyer. Well, they will go where they know, and they basically engage the services of their former organization. So there's obviously key benefits there. So essentially, we've got 4 ways that we are looking at really breaking down that the antiquated, anachronistic lifetime career model where we pretend we have promotion opportunities for a lot more people than we actually have, and we realize and we recognize that we can engage employees even though we're not necessarily going to promote all of them within our organization. And I've talked about 4 mechanisms to do that, but they're all centered around the acceptance that the lifetime career model is dead and that the career will be finite and transitory, although we can make that transition last 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or 15 years, or 20 years even, and beyond, depending on our relationship and our affiliation with the employee. So we shouldn't interpret this as necessarily a very, very short-term phenomenon. It can work long-term, but we're not doing it under false pretenses anymore. So we talked about career management, and we talked about the concept of long-term, lifetime employability as opposed to performance management and promotion. We talked about the importance of networking, and from an organization standpoint, encourage everybody in our organization, even and especially the ones that are not external facing, to develop and to get involved and to network with peers, with colleagues, with like-minded individuals, and we provide that support, that training on social media, etc. And by doing that and by promoting that, the tours of duty concept, although controversial, is still another way where we can basically focus on improving the lifetime employability of the employee as opposed to promising a promotion that may never happen, or not moving them fast enough, or they don't learn fast enough. So the tour of duty concept is finite, it's transitory, but the preliminary research is showing that it's starting to be effective, especially in a key number of specific groups. And of course, for those, because we're no longer talking about lifetime employment and promotion and keeping someone indefinitely in our organization, the role of promoting and building a vibrant alumni and tapping into that and having a win-win or exchange is key, essentially, and having that long-term affiliation is key. Even though the employee is no longer working for us directly, we still haven't lost contact. and we still can tap into that knowledge and that network that employee will bring as we move on. So essentially, there's 4 tools here, 4 trends that we're seeing in the marketplace. In my discussions with clients, there's a lot of interest specifically around the concept of career management and networking, alumni, and some in tours of duty, depending on certain circumstances. So fundamentally, I guess my message to you today is the engagement rewards of doing this and investing and taking a different approach to an employee's career is going to far outweigh the risk that the employee is going to leave. You know why? Because we're already realizing the risk. The employees are leaving anyway. Or worse yet, they're disengaged, as I showed you in the top slides. And then they're not, because they're disengaged, they're not performing at their full potential to us. So on that note, I'm going to turn it back over to Sean. He'll tell you a little bit where you can catch up with us. As you can see, we're very active in terms of the speaker circuit and getting up there ourselves and doing our own networking. So, Sean, if you please.
Sure. Thank you, Norm. Excellent overview on and new thinking on professional growth and ways to approach it. And I think some of it looks sort of controversial, but I think you couched it in a way that it might look controversial, but it's something that's inevitable, that we've got to create an environment where we allow people to grow, and we can't stop the tide of the Internet enabling people to network, so let's encourage them to do so. One question came in, just before I sort of talk about what's upcoming, one question came in around, particularly around the tour of duty, and it was asked around how do you implement something like that? Do you implement it with everyone in the organization? Is that implemented just with sort of select? Do you do a pilot? What are some of the things that maybe you've seen around around the tour of duty?
In some organizations that are very geographically spread, some organizations have actually implemented it, looked at it specifically in a pilot case in specific geographic regions, for example. That's one way of doing it, where that concept might be a little bit more avant-garde. For example, I know one client that's basically looked at California, the state of California, and because a lot of their employee base comes from Silicon Valley and is very, very different thinking to begin with. They've tried that, and it's working pretty well. They do get, it's actually interesting because in the interview process, they can weed out the folks that are more or less entrepreneurial by the ones that are less entrepreneurial, more risk averse, are the ones that are very uncomfortable with that tour of duty and don't have the confidence in themselves that they can build their own employability in a limited amount of time. And it's precisely the opposite that this particular client is trying to attract. Pilot tests work very well, and where we're seeing this take greater hold faster, I guess, is in the 2 segments that I spoke about earlier. So when we're looking at bringing in very, very specific expertise, maintaining or keeping people who have good knowledge of the company, but necessarily our organization, but we're normally looking at retirement or a pre-retirement situation. That seems to be where there's the least resistance because of the obvious retirement being at the end of the game. But where I would look at it is in some external facing or business development roles in new employees coming in. That's really where this is coming from, where this is emanating from, and start to talk and start to essentially form some individual relationships, individual contractual relationships, and see how it goes from there. That's basically it. Really is an experimental phase right now. It's more research than implementation, but all signals are pointing to that it's having a positive effect.
Yeah, it seems like this is good. It seems like we're, and it's probably the way forces are happening. We're downloading as employers, pushing more and more responsibility onto the employees. But I guess that's the way of the world. That it's a lot more individualistic and entrepreneurial, and the expectation is there. And tour duty is sort of a reflection of that a little bit. So I thought that was good. If there's any other questions that come in, please feel free to email myself or Norm. And of course, we've got upcoming webinars, just a couple of things that are coming up in January. Employee engagement, moving the needle. How do you create executive buy-in? Often we have organizations that are thinking of doing a survey or want to do a survey, but they feel that the management team's not fully on board. So what are some things you can do? How do you position a survey? Usually what we find is in the human resource side, fully bought in. Executive, not always. Maybe there's a bit of a patchwork in terms of level of buy-in. So it's really around how do you create executive buy-in, and that's January 22nd. And we're going to be at a couple events in January, the HRPA conference, of course. We'll have a booth there, and we're speaking at that. We're going to be out in Calgary at the HRIA conference later in April. And what's really exciting is we have upcoming research that we're working on with the Conference Board of Canada, and that will be initially previewed in May 25th at a engagement conference put on by the Conference Board. So we're really looking at the last 10 years and doing a complete systematic review of the research out there and saying, what have we really learned around engagement? So we've been at this whole area of measuring engagement and improving on it. As a society and as an economy, what have we learned about it, and where do we go from here? So that's some interesting work that TalentMap has on the upgo. And then we'll just wrap up. If you want to contact Norm, you can always reach him at Norm Bailey David at talentmap.com, or his extension is extension 504. So Norm, thank you very much. Great insight and some real interesting ideas on what different organizations are doing, from career management to tours of duty to alumni networks. Fantastic overview of sort of the professional growth range and what you could do to help stem the tide, I guess, a little bit around engagement and retention. So I think that's it. We'll sign off there, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a great afternoon.